I am here with Dan Goodstadt. Am I saying your name right?
Goodstadt.
Goodstadt. Dan Goodstadt. He is a man of many hats. Um, Started at a very young age in New York. Big fan of the car industry at an early age of 16, 15, 17. Through family relationship, your father, and his business, which he was a limousine driver back in the days.
Had a big limousine company.
Yeah, moving people around. He was able to run into one of the greatest drivers at the time, and still recognized today, Emerson Fittipaldi. Emerson, who then moved to Miami and did his racing here. Um, Through that relationship, Dan was able to connect with Emerson in New York and was later invited to come down to Miami. And it was the beginning of the continuance because it hasn't ended.
No, it hasn't ended yet.
Dan today is now one of the leaders in Douglas in sales, but not only in just real estate. He's also doing yacht sales, car sales, planes, and he's a man that does a multi version of things. And why is that, Dan? Why do you do multi version of things?
Because it's not about the product, it's about my relationships. And I've been very fortunate through my last 30 years, professionally, personally, socially, to create a network of some very special high net worth individuals that have the similar passions to me, and they trust in me to deliver for them.
Let's walk back in time and bring me back to when you were that 17-year-old and you got to meet an idol. And in doing that, walk us through just the understanding of meeting someone that you just looked up to.
So I grew up in New York, which wasn't traditionally a racer's town. Racing back in those days was the South or the Midwest. NASCAR, even IndyCar was more of a Southern or Midwestern sport, which is now a great sport of the whole United States. So I had the good fortune to meet Emerson Fittipaldi. And as a child growing up in New York, I was enamored by cars and boats, anything with a gas engine that raced, went fast. Had my first boat when I was 13 years old. I was very fortunate. My parents provided a boat. I was partners with my brother on it. We lived on the water. We were taking boats out at 12 and 13 years old with no adults. From that,
That was simple and easy back then.
it was so easy. I think we had a depth finder and a VHF radio, and they worked when you hoped they worked. So I learned how to tinker and to get things to work. If you had a boat and you invited your friends over and the boat didn't work, no one was your friend. So
Yeah.
you figured it out and you got the boats to work. So I picked up some.
You were mechanically savvy at the time?
I've always been, enough to get things working.
Good. Good.
And from there, I had an uncle that had four daughters, and he was very passionate about sailing. And he and I hit it off, and I started racing sailboats with him in the mid-teens.
Okay.
Even though I was a diehard power boater, and my dad was a phenomenal, well-known fisherman, and we fished every weekend, 6, 7 months a year. I now started racing sailboats with my uncle, and which turned into me maintaining his boat at a small yacht club. And then the next guy would say, hey, can you do this for me? Hey, so by the time I graduated high school off to college, I had a little cottage industry for a few months a year where I had a couple of kids working for me, taking care of people's boat at a small little yacht club. So I learned a lot about products, maintenance, the composition of a boat. You start taking apart the floors. You have teak floors, and you pull them up, and you're fixing a bilge pump. So, I grew up in this privileged little childhood, and all of a sudden, I'm in the bilges of boats and cleaning them and scrubbing teak decks, and so I learned a lot.
Dissecting the tool itself. And it's funny because a lot of people that walk in the stores, great leaders today in the boating industry, but we all start one way, which is basically by cleaning the boats and servicing the boats. And once you do that, you get to know the guts and the heart and liver of the boats. So it makes it easier. Now, so this is going back when you were 17, 18, younger?
It started probably between 12 and 14, culminating when I moved out of town at 17. So I was, playing with boats. I was very fortunate. My parents allowed me to buy a vintage Porsche in high school that I finished the restoration on.
Nice. So how did you end up in Miami?
This time, I was in Los Angeles in the entertainment industry, and things were going well. I was moving along at a nice clip, and Emerson Fittipaldi had flown in prior to the Long Beach Grand Prix, and I had a relationship with him going back to when I was probably 17 years old. I think I met him in 1984. So now I'm probably 28 years old, and I'm living in Los Angeles.
Good age.
And I had started in the entertainment industry, the famous mailroom, and from there became partners with another gentleman that was a movie producer, and we started a talent agency. And one of my biggest claims to fame is I was Vince Vaughn's first manager.
No way.
I put him in the movie Rudy at the time.
Wow.
And then boom, I was out of the entertainment industry. So
That was quick in and out,
it was
but yeah.
quick in and out. Well, no, I was there for a few years, but that was my last hurrah
Good way to go out.
in the entertainment industry. So
This is in LA.
this is in Los Angeles. So now I'm in Los Angeles trying to figure out what my next play is. And Emerson calls me. He says, I'm at the Bel Air Hotel. And it was probably the week before the Long Beach Grand Prix. He says, come have lunch at the pool. He had a bungalow. So I go to the Bel Air Hotel, and Emerson's there, his wife, Teresa, who I was very close with at the time. And he comes and greets me. By the time I walk in, who walks out of the bungalow is George Harrison from the Beatles and a very famous
Wow.
Brazilian musician by the name of Sergio Mendes. So,
So everybody knows who Sergio Mendes is, and in the industry, but yeah.
so we spent the day laughing and just kidding and having a good time. And before I left that day, we were on the phone with my former boss from the talent agency, which was the biggest music agency in Hollywood at the time. And we were discussing putting together a Beatles reunion tour with George Harrison and Paul McCartney. And, one thing led to another. It was a fun, exciting day, and left from there and started the discussions of moving to Miami. This is 1996. And Emerson told me confidentially at the time that he was going to retire. And remembered, this is IndyCar in 1996. It's his second career. He retired from Formula One, which he raced from 1970 to 1980. So he retired. He had started his own Formula One team. And in 1984, Ralph Sanchez, a famous real estate developer, started the Miami Grand Prix in the streets of Miami. And he brought Emerson out of retirement to drive a sports car in the streets of Miami to sell tickets.
Wow.
That was his marquee name. So Emerson was retired, came out of retirement. The next year, a Miami businessman paid him to race the Indy 500. He won Rookie of the Year. By the next year, they had Marlboro in IndyCar with Emerson. By '89, he won the championship. He won the Indy 500 and won the Indy 500 again in 1993. Marlboro stayed in IndyCar. Was the longest sports sponsorship.
This is back in 1993 in Miami when the races were taking place by the Intercontinental Hotel.
It was 84 and 85.
84, 85. So Brickell at the time, just banks.
Bang! It wasn't Brickell. It was Biscayne Boulevard. It was banks and rundown buildings. It was maybe not so safe at night.
You know what's funny? The history of Miami, the making of Miami, and I'm going to keep this as a short story. You have the Flagler story, but the guys behind Flagler was John Collins and Carl Fisher.
Yes.
And Carl Fisher was in charge of the Speedway up north.
It's even better. Carl Fisher was an entrepreneur that was like very typical in real estate developers today. He was a billionaire or the equivalent.
Yep.
And broke a number of times in his life.
Oh, because he liked to push the envelope every time.
So he's pushed the envelope. He built the Indianapolis Motor Speedway
Correct.
in Indiana because it was central to all the automobile manufacturers were in that area. They weren't just in Detroit. They were in Illinois, they were in Indiana, they were in Michigan. So the Indianapolis Motor Speedway was built as a proving grounds or a a testing track for new product, and then the Indy 500 came along, and here we are 100 years later.
What he started in Miami when they started the dig to create the government cut, and all that dirt, the power went into Fisher Island and the Venetian Causeway and the Sunset Island. All those are man-made.
Yes.
And the vision was to put all the dirt in these man-made, call it ponds, whatever you want to call it, and sell it as real estate. But to do that, they had to think of a way to bring in the buyers. And what they started to do was the race boats and the regattas. That was the attraction. Built the first hotel. Then John Collins involved in this one, and that they do the attraction, bring them in, do the race, and show them the plots of land. So that's how the real estates were sold, by creating the boating attraction. So the combination of both. It seems to have, you seem to have that same seed that built Miami. So
Yes.
now you moved to Miami once you left LA, and did you complete the concert with the reunion of the Beatles?
So this was in 1996. A month later, Emerson had a career-ending crash in Michigan. I remember him calling me. I remember watching the race and just going pale white and saying, "Oh my God, I can't believe this." And he and I had a number of projects on the table. So I had like this guilty feeling, like here's a man that invited me into his family. It was more than business. I was part of his family, and here he is. The next morning, I'm in California, so it's 2 hours earlier than Michigan, and like 6, 7 a.m. in the morning, my phone rings, landline, no cell phones at the time, I don't believe. And I answer the phone, and it's Emerson.
Oh, so he's okay.
So what happened was they stabilized him in Michigan, flew him to Miami in the middle of the night. The Miami Project to Cure Paralysis, Dr. Barth Green, and Jackson Memorial Hospital did surgery on him overnight, and it was a new era of thinking of the
Medical treatment.
of the healing process. And they used to have these people in bed for like 3 months, 6 months after surgery. They had them up and walking like hours after surgery.
What?
He called me.
Wow.
It was 3 hours after surgery. I just got the chills right now. He called me. He's like, "How are you?" I said, "How am I?" I said,
Yeah, how are you?
How are you?
Right?
He says, "I just did my second walk of the morning. I'm
What?
making my phone calls." He goes, "When are you coming to Miami to see me?" And from there, my life changed, and
Wow.
I moved to Miami January 2nd. This was probably July, August that summer. So I moved to Miami January 2nd, and came in and got into business with Emerson.
Now, this is the beginning of the continuous success you've had. You moved to Miami, you're under Emerson's wing. What was the first startup? Did you start on boats, cars, homes?
Well, I had already been doing a number of licensing and marketing deals for him. And he had already done a couple of deals with some major players in the marine industry. Chris Craft in 1989, I believe, built a speedboat. They were in the cigarette-type racing boat business, and they built a Fittipaldi Stinger or Scorpion, I can't remember the name, a 30-foot go-fast in like Ferrari red. And it was featured, the movie starred along with Mel Gibson in a movie called Tequila Sunrise. So he had done that boat. 2 years later, within the next year or two, Chris Craft got out of the high-performance boat business, and he won the Indy 500 again in '93. And Wellcraft, who's still a major player in the industry, came to him to build a Fittipaldi Scarab. And the Scarab was the biggest competitor to cigarette boats back in those days.
Wow.
So it wasn't my deal, but I was involved with him in the marketing and the exposure. And then they actually took a long-term relationship of Emerson's, and they made the first AMG/Mercedes authorized or licensed speedboat with twin 5-liter AMG V8s in it.
Wow. So the whole cross thing has been going on for a long time. I'm noticing it now. We just had the Lamborghini situation go on. You got the Porsche design. But, it's good to hear that back in time, this was already taking place.
Yes, this was the first of those deals.
Pretty much, right?
It's interesting because Carlo Riva, the founder of Riva Boats, who everybody that thinks about boating always wishes at one time or another
get
to
a
have a
Riva.
Riva.
Yeah.
Back in the day, everybody wanted a 33 or a 38 Aqua Riva because they were sexy speedboats. But today they're building boats up to 100 and no, up to 50 meters, 170 something feet. They've built 3 of those now. So at the time, Mr. Lamborghini, the founder of Lamborghini Cars, built a Riva for Lake Como, and he had twin Lamborghini engines in it. And that boat was just restored, and I think it's for sale today.
Wow.
So it's a Riva Lamborghini.
Well, see, I think that the Rivas, to me, what they have is that the amount of square footage and how they design the space and put in the rooms in it. When you walk into, there was I think it was a 39-foot Riva, and it has 3 staterooms. They were spacious, high ceilings, comfortable 3 staterooms on a 39-foot boat.
Well, today, even today, and for quite some time, Riva's been known as probably one of the most expensive boats you could buy per foot.
Mm-hmm.
And
Viking is there, but yeah,
yeah, but
different
people
brand,
don't really say, "Oh, I'm going to buy a 30-foot boat." Boats are $10,000 a foot. People look at boats and they say, "Oh, it's this much and that much." And there's entry level boats, and then there's, depending on the size of boat you're talking, there could be an Italian boat or a Dutch boat. When you start talking yachts over 100 feet or over 120 feet, it was always known that Dutch made the best boats out there. Just the finish, the approach, the quality. Today, when you start going over 100 meters, which is over 330 feet, Germany seems to lead the way on that via Lursen, King Rasmussen, and a number of other brands.
Then you got yourself well known in the yacht. Well, now you're leading on the mega yachts. That's been your focus.
You know what? I really don't focus on any segment per se. I've turned my social life into my business. And when people ask me what I do, I sell real estate, yachts, and planes. And sometimes I mix up the order, depends on where my head is at that day. And during COVID, I really jumped in head first into real estate, even though I had my license for a number of years prior and had 2 amazing years. Boat sales started to take off. And then the last year or 2, everybody knows real estate has quieted down. And just by good graces and good luck and hard work and a lot of socializing, my yacht career has taken off, and it exceeded the real estate for the first time.
So for someone like yourself who started to do real estate, you've been with Douglas for 10 years, you say, doing real estate, doing fine. Now you have you have your broker's license. Anyone that's in real estate today, what would you give as an advice to say, is it something they should consider? Is it worth it?
If you have the relationships I have, and if your real estate career is based around your relationships, there's 2 types of brokers out there or agents out there, generally in real estate, and it's that person that's hungry and starving and just very entrepreneurial with a lot of energy, and they say, I'm going to get into real estate, and they go this direction, they go that direction, and they figure it out, and 2-3 years later, or in a year they're making a living, 2-3 years later they're making good money, and 5 years later they're living the life that they dreamed about. And that's real estate. If you put the time in, it's there. We're in a town where the population has actually, in the state, has decreased for the first time 2 consecutive years. But
As far as the numbers of people coming into the city?
We've actually had a declining population. But we do have more transactions on an annual basis. Now, with interest rates peaking in the last couple of years, around 7%, people don't realize that that's actually not expensive compared to my lifetime. And but they were spoiled 2, 3, and 4%.
Yeah.
People thought paying 5% because they had a blemish on their credit report was high, but 5% is value.
Are you talking about the Carter years when we had, 19% interest rate?
I remember when I was 12 or 13 years old, my mom was getting CDs, certificates of deposit at like 13%. People were buying homes and taking 12% mortgages.
I think between 6 to 7%, it's an average.
Yes, and they correct. But seeing in our lifetime, just 3 years ago, 2%, 2.5% mortgages is we hopefully will see again.
Yeah, well, we'll see about that. No, but what in hearing your story, in doing what you've been doing, selling the cars, the homes, and the yachts and the boats, you're not focused on a particular zone. So what you've done, what you've mastered is your relationships. And
That's
what
it.
you've catered to is the individuals that you attend to. And that, like you said, you've made your social life work.
Yes.
And so secondary to that is your expertise in understanding the real estate market, understanding its, per square footage, kind of getting a forecast of the market. You also know your boats very well, but starting at the age that you did, understanding, and it's funny, you wash your boat. When you wash your boat, you got to lift compartments and you see over and over again to learn what they're made of. So you're very knowledgeable in boats. And since the beginning of your time, your fascination towards cars and the engines and the makes and the horsepower has given you that ability to know each category in its full extent. So what you bring to the table to your customers is experience. And that experience, you just guide them to make the best decision when it comes to whatever they're going to purchase. Which out of the three seems to be your favorite?
It's hard to say, but I love boats. Everybody loves boats. And I love cars. And one of the tools I use because of my privilege or gift of network is when people come to Miami for the first time, or I meet someone for the first time, or they're an existing friend, and we just came out of a period of boom where boats weren't available, cars weren't available. There was so much cash in the market. Mm-hmm. So people like, Dan, I want a Range Rover. This guy wants this. So I have a great network of car dealerships. So people call me, can you get me this Range Rover? Can you get me this Porsche? And I usually don't make $1 on it. Mm-hmm. But when you get the person the car, or and you save them, in New York, they're getting a $25,000 premium on a long wheelbase Range Rover, and I get it for them for 10 over, and I get them the color they wanted, and they have the car in 7 days.
They're grateful and they appreciate it.
And then they refer me to the next person. And I have one client here in Miami who has a history of in and out of Miami, but he's a real estate developer from New York, California, very successful, spends a lot of money. And within the first month I met him, I sold him a 108-foot yacht, I think 1 or 2 years old.
Wow.
We got a crazy deal on it. I retraded the deal after we made the contract. I got him more because of a situation. He was ecstatic, still loves the boat today. I think he's had it 3 years. And within a year, he had me get him a 40-foot rib to tow behind. And it was a high performance. It was $1 million rib. $10 million yacht, $1 million rib. And then the next thing comes up is he bought some land to build a spec home or a family home in Miami Beach. And he needed a home immediately for his children that were in high school.
So you provide the full service for the guy. So you got him the how did you, in the beginning, you met him through your associates, I take it?
Through a social group of friends that I became very close with during COVID, because what did we do during COVID? We were in Miami. We weren't sitting home with the doors locked.
Out and about, yeah.
We were at one central place 3-4 nights a week with a group of people. And it was just like creating a new network for me. It was a 10-year network created in 18 months.
You've seen the scene, you see the people coming and going. You've seen those that are in the real estate and every other avenue. But you also see what they're lacking. So if you were to point out some of the flaws that people tend to not have but should consider, embrace, and focus on, what would you say?
Don't go to people. Talk about what you do. Talk about what you enjoy. Talk about your last deal, but never go to anybody and pitch them to sell them anything.
That's a fair enough deal. And in the market, and now we do a lot of the yachts and the boats and the rentals. We got people walking in, they want to get into this industry. Anyone that's thinking about getting into the industry, what would you comment to them about? What advice would you give?
You can only do as much as your knowledge. So, for instance, this last year at the Fort Lauderdale show, there's a realtor I know, and they had sent out a bunch of emails that they just got their yacht broker's license. And as you know, a yacht broker's license is nothing more than a criminal background check and being bonded, because it's there to protect the consumer, the state of Florida is protecting the consumer, and I think it's very valid.
In New York.
New York has one also. I've never had one. So I have a Florida yacht broker's license, and I didn't have one for many years because people just would call me, and I'd make a phone call, and I knew this person. In fact, I was at dinner with one of the biggest developers in Miami, and he's a boater, and he came to me and he's like, Dan, I need a big boat. My father and I, we're chartering 170, 180 feet every summer. We need a boat. He had just finished a very, very prolific tower that's globally known. And he said, I've got 2 penthouses there. They're $25 million. He goes, I'll cut a deal with somebody. I'll give them the penthouses. And at the time, the yacht business was moving along, but it wasn't like COVID times where there were no boats available. He said, find me the guy that needs to get out of a big yacht.
Let's do a trade.
And I'll trade him my penthouse for this yacht. I'm like, okay. Make a phone call to a friend of mine that's car dealer, race team owner, NASCAR, and he owned a big yacht manufacturing. And he was a player in the yacht industry at the time. I call him, within an hour, I got a call back. Another car dealer that is the largest private owner of dealerships in the United States, very well known in the yacht industry because he's built a number of yachts, owned a number of yachts. I mean, probably over 10, over 100 feet. Today, his yacht is 125 meters, I believe, like 360 feet.
Yeah.
So he had a 161-foot boat for sale, yacht. He had just bought a 202-foot one, and he needed to get the 161. And he's had this habit of buying penthouses around the world.
Oh.
So he calls. He goes, my friend wants to sit down and talk. So now I've got this 161-foot yacht that is represented by another brokerage, and I've got the penthouse, and the gentleman that owned the condo, we met at the condo. There was a restaurant in the lobby, and he comes to me and goes, how much you want to make on this deal? I said, I think this is fair. Mm-hmm. He goes, okay. And I had already cut a deal for the commission on the boat side because there was going to be some cash and whatever. He goes, you can leave now. I said, what? He goes, we'll take care of this. They did the deal that night on a napkin.
Signed it off and called it.
And without me there. And I already...
Oh, that's a trust that you built with your clients.
Right. Here was a very knowledgeable yacht owner. Here's a very knowledgeable yacht buyer. He's got the penthouse. The building is the biggest thing in the world at the time. And so they cut the deal. Miami Boat Show comes. It's, Valentine's weekend, President's weekend. We go down to the show to see the boat. One thing leads to another, and a cash offer comes in for the boat. And actually a little bidding war. My client was going to take the boat to move the penthouse, and then they were going to move up to a bigger boat, but it didn't have an elevator on it. And his father's getting older, so they got a cash offer, and they said yes, and they released it. So I lost my commission on the boat that day. It was a nice commission.
The highs and the lows that happen in the industry.
But the buyer wired the money to the seller, and he bought the penthouse anyway.
Oh, that's nice. That's huge.
So sold the penthouse, cash deal, huge commission, and it got me motivated. In fact, there were probably 15 stories written in media across the United States about the sale. It was the highest price for a condo in Dade County up until last year, 2 years ago, probably for 5 years, 6 years.
Just for anyone who's doing real estate, the idea of having the license in both is beneficial to you. And not only is it going to help you in the sale, but you're also enriching your relationship with your buyer. I mean, it's no longer a buyer and a seller. You're not representing a guy. You're becoming friends, and you're looking out for the best interest, which seems to be what you do best at.
It's great. And we had a great migration of individuals, not just from all over the United States, but from all over the world.
True. That's why I love Miami.
Exactly. So one of my best referrers is a dear friend, and he's from the UK. Spent a lot of time in New York, and he bought a home in Miami November before COVID. So here COVID comes, and he's got this home. It's got 6 bedrooms, and that's where we were every night for like 12, 15 months. And I didn't have to leave his house. That was my showroom.
I feel your pain. The house staying 6 bedrooms, probably what area?
Miami Beach, Venetian Causeway.
Waterfront property?
It was a waterfront house. He bought fully furnished,
Jeez.
move-in ready for like 12 and change. By the end of the 2 years of COVID, he was getting letters in his mailbox for offering him 25 and 26 million dollars for the house, and still worth that 25 million today.
No words to describe the growth that Miami as a city has had. In real estate, the expansion with the number of people that moved to Miami, although you mentioned that it's a decline in the last 2 years. But I think that's a temporary shift.
You know, and that it's not a fair number. The decline is actually for the state of Florida. Dade County is hit or miss. A lot of it, our traffic and residences are seasonal.
Yep.
I believe that our annual residency is up like substantial numbers since pre-COVID. I don't think they're going to go away. Unfortunately, we're losing people on the low end of the middle class, the service people, the electricians, the plumbers, and I'm not talking about the people that own the company, but the guy that drives the truck every day. Unfortunately, he's got to live so far, and he's got to pay so much for housing. By the time he gets to Dade County, it doesn't make sense.
Well, we can dive into that just a little bit and not to extend it. There's a filtering process, I call it. And Miami is, it had its reputation back in the 80s and 90s, and we know the story of Miami and the making of Miami. But it's now known for the real players that are coming from all over the world, whether you're Italian, you're Russian, you're from South America, California, New York, Chicago, Boston. They're all making their way. And Miami is a town. It's not a big city. It's a town. So because of this town, the wealth, I've lost count of the millionaires that live in the city. And they're coming, and more are coming.
Forget the millionaires. It's the billionaires that are here.
Correct.
And there was an article in the Wall Street Journal a number of months ago, and it said that Miami is the town where the billionaires are chasing the 100 millionaires to Fort Lauderdale because the real estate got so expensive here. But Fort Lauderdale's catching up now because
it's a
beautiful lifestyle also.
Yeah. So because of that, to your point, we are losing the lower end of the stick, but that's what's happening in Miami. So that's out of our control. Our job is to kind of serve them as they come and they move in. And if you're in real estate, like Dan's doing, expand your reach. Get yourself a broker license. Work in the industry because you are catering to the same client. That is your client, and what you do is you build in that relationship.
And you don't really need to know much about boats. You don't need to be a boat fan. You don't need to learn about Mercury engines, Yamaha engines, Caterpillar diesels, or MTU diesels. You just need to know where to take your client. And if you have a trusted client that just bought a $10 million home on the water or bought a few $1 million condo in a building that has a marina behind it, or you just have the guy who moved from New York and had a house in the Hamptons and loved boating and wants to buy a boat here, you become a referrer. Do you need a license to be referred? No, but when you're licensed, it protects you down the line. And you start off by doing a referral. Next thing you do is go to a boat show, go to the closing, and you learn. And 5 years from now, maybe you're not doing a referral. You're selling a twin outboard runabout. And from the twin outboard runabout, the guy comes back to you and says, I'm ready. My wife and I think we need 3 staterooms and a fly bridge. And the next thing you know, you're selling them a 60-foot
Azimut, Prestige,
Ferretti.
What is your outlook? And I'll close it with this. What is your outlook of Miami in the next 10 years?
More growth. And believe it or not, the good news that we're getting today is that there's been a drop in rents. We have a glut of rental apartments, which I think is going to help Miami get to the next level, because the correction of the rents are going to allow more people to come in. Because as the millionaires, the 50 millionaires, the 100 millionaires, and the billionaires come to town, we need people to serve them.
Sure.
They come here with bags of money. They want to spend money. They want to spend a lot of money, but there needs to be people to serve it, and these people need to live like human beings.
Just for the record, if you're going to come down here and provide that service, make sure you come knowing that it's a career and we want you to do it right. We care about our people, all people, and the quality of service in Miami, we want to definitely improve and get it to its best part. So, sorry.
No,
I had to throw that in there because
it's true.
so many good restaurants, but sometimes we look at service and it's questionable. So
You know, I moved to Miami full time in
97.
1997. Yes. And at the time, Miami Beach only had two, maybe three restaurants with professional waiters. You had the Forge, which was an icon.
Oh, Sharif Melnick and
Yeah,
El Melnick.
Sharif's the best,
Yep.
him and his father.
Yep.
So they had the Forge, and you had career waiters there, and then you had Joe Stonecrab. You
yeah.
had career waiters. These guys were making
Still there?
yeah, making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year waiting tables, and they were closed 3 months a year.
Jack Penrose was still around, right?
Jack Penrod had Penrod's down in South Point
Yeah.
before he changed
Nikki
it
Beach.
to Nikki Beach.
Yeah.
But my point is that the people that were working restaurants, it was a joke, is we would go to the same restaurants over and over, and we would say if the food was good and the service was great, this would be a great restaurant. But we would eat at those restaurants because they were the only ones around. Today, you have every restaurateur from around the world, not just the United States, opening up restaurants, and there's more restaurants than there are people. So we have record number of restaurants closing because people aren't doing their homework and they're dreamers more than anything.
But you got to maintain. I think if you have the service, and not to drop a name, but Sardinia's is one of the restaurants that we know very well, the Italian restaurant on Purdy Avenue, and that restaurant has great service, and we've been going there for many years. But so you see the future of Miami blossoming.
It's going to continue on a trajectory to the moon.
Well, listen, you heard it from him. I'm supporting his statement. Dan, I want to thank you very much for taking the time and hopefully guiding some people that are thinking about getting into the boating industry where you're a real estate agent. But either way, it's what your biggest mention is that this is all about relationship.
100%.
And it's building that rapport with the individual that you want to work with, not just one deal, but multi deals. And you, as an example, have gained not only the success on the financial level, but I understand you tend to travel a lot too. And you stay in some of these homes and you live a great life because of these relationships. So thank you, Dan, for your time. Well appreciated, guys. And stay tuned for the next episode. We love you, and we'll see you in the next.
Thank you.
Dan, appreciate that one. We got to teach them what needs to be done. We got to get better by talking about it. You know what I mean?
Look,